The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question to the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is back in session. It is July 14th, 2026, and once again we are going to look at the situation in Ukraine. So, let's start. First of all, we're going to look at the Zaporizhzhia/Dnipropetrovsk direction. The Russians, apparently according to Syriac maps, were kicked out of the suburb of the city of Arekhov, known as Mala-Tokmachka. Mala-Tokmachka has been contested by both sides for the last 4 years. I'm not joking, by the way. They have been contesting for this insignificant village here, for the most part, since 2022. There are no changes in Novodanilovka, and there are little to no changes in the direction of Stepnogorsk, though what we can assume at this time is that the Russians are attempting to counterattack here, but haven't made major leeway just yet. The offensive by the Vostok group, though, continues in the direction of Arekhov, despite Dnipro group's setbacks. And for those of you who do not follow my map, I had put Zivka in the gray zone along with Verkhna Tursa. But in recent days, Z Committee, which is arguably the most reliable pro-Russia map, has put these two settlements back under firm Russian control. Well, for the most part, unless you're Verkhna Tursa. And as a result, Syriac has put these back under Russian control once more. So we can safely say that the battles for these villages here towards the northern supply route to the city of Arekhov is continuing. There are reports, especially, that Lyubitsky, which is this settlement here, that's on the road to Arekhov, is being contested right now between both Russia and Ukraine. Should the Russians capture Lyubitsky, the Ukrainians are effectively, for the most part, cut off from Arekhov. Though I'm sure they're going to find some BS ways to supply the town by, like, drones, helicopters, or some Mickey Mouse bullshit. But for the most part, though, from a logistical standpoint, Arekhov is cooked. And not even these dirt roads here going through Mikhelske is going to save it. Once Lyubitsky is gone, that's it for Arekhov. Though it's probably going to take another few months or so for that town to fall like Gule-Pule did. Not many changes here within the Dnipropetrovsk direction, though Skala, which is a very controversial brigade in the armed forces of Ukraine, have claimed to start a counteroffensive in a ditch effort to kick the Russians out of this part of the Dnipropetrovsk region. And so far, according to Deep State UA, they were able to do so, but they haven't really posted a lot of proof, like, you know, suggesting that they did accomplish in booting out the Russians from this area. So on my map, which I'll put in the link in the description below, it has everything here in a gray zone. Like, there's no paint whatsoever. And I honestly think that all mappers should do the same. Ukrainians might have control of Pitobine, but that's about it. There's otherwise no proof of control by either side in this direction. Now, in the Dobropila direction, the Russians have continued advancing towards the city of Dobropila, and they have effectively cleared out Rodensky, at least according to most mappers. I've had Rodensky under Russian control for a very long time because I didn't really count those infiltrations as Ukrainian control. And also, I just didn't see a need to put in a gray zone because I knew the Russians would eventually take full control of it again, as they were, you know, slated to do anyway. And also, they have continued to flank the town of Bieletsky as well. And I'm confident that within a month or two or now, the Russians should be able to take Bieletsky completely from the Ukrainians. Otherwise, though, not a lot of news from this direction, though we can assume that clashes are very much ongoing. In the Konstantinovka direction, little to no changes. The Syriac has put most, if not all, of the city under Russian control, except for these blocks here in the northwestern section of the city. And then in the Slavyansk-Kramatorsk direction, Tikhonivka is apparently under complete Russian control, though Syriac still has this small portion here in, I guess, in a gray zone. And there's also reports that the Ukrainians are about to be dealt another blow. They are apparently fighting with the Russians now for control over the village of Persho-Marivka. Persho-Marivka. Should they lose this and these high ground areas here, then the Russians will effectively be, well, looking at Kramatorsk from a hilltop. They'll be able to fire upon it with conventional weaponry, and they should be able to reach the city within a few months or so from now. In fact, I do believe that the battle for Slavyansk and the Kramatorsk is going to start, I think, maybe late 2026, not early 27, because then that would be very late, and also that would mean that attrition is not on the Russian side. But yeah, I'm expecting the battle for both cities to start very soon, and once that happens, the armed forces of Ukraine within the Donetsk region are cooked. Like, completely cooked. Raya Alexandrovka is being cleared out of any remaining Ukrainian resistance, and these forested areas up north of the village are also in the process of being cleared out as well. And there's also reports of Mykolaiivka being dealt with severe bombardment by the Russian Air Force and, of course, the UAVs. So we can expect the Russians to probably be in Mykolaiivka sometime in August in some shape or form. Otherwise, though, not much ground changes have taken place. Liman has also not changed too much, too. No changes in the northern flank of Liman. And then in the Kupiansk direction, again, we have little to no changes, though we can assume that the Zapad group is mopping up the rest of Kupiansk and also the rest or remainder of the eastern Oskol pocket between Kupiansk, Vozlove, and Glushkovka. Now, going a little further up north, the Russians have continued to clear out Novo-Vasilievka and Ivanovka. But otherwise, though, little to no changes. And then in the area of Bily Kolodiez, this is like northeastern Kharkiv region, Syriac now agrees that the Russians did break through in this area, and they are contesting right now for Bily Kolodiez too. There's also reliable reports that Zakharivka and Volokivsky are also contested right now by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And should the Russians take control over these two villages here, then I think it is safe to assume that the northeastern Kharkiv direction, which is all this, is probably going to fall to Russia maybe by the, I guess, Halloween, October, November of 2026. I mean, the Russians are bound to take control of at least around 10% or 15% of Kharkiv region once all is said and done. If not more, of course, depending on the situation here in the rest of these areas that are just north or east of the Oskol, not Oskol, the Servetsky Donetsk River. And then we also got reports that the Russians are continuing to advance down here, but we don't have any further news other than the fact that it is quite possible that Vilcha is back under Russian control, along with also Grafsky too, but we have to wait a little longer to get information from there. But according to Military Summary, he thinks that once Bily Kolodiez falls, then basically all of this will just collapse quickly for the armed forces of Ukraine. And then the Russians can essentially reestablish their Kharkiv civil or military civilian administration. So anybody who left the Kharkiv region back in September 2022 during the Ukrainians' counteroffensive, they can start slowly but surely returning to Kharkiv region, though what they're going to see, of course, will be quite grim because most of these settlements and towns or cities are all in ruins by now, which is very unfortunate. And then we got some big news, too, from the town of KOZACHA LOPAN. The Russians have claimed over half, if not more than half, of KOZACHA LOPAN after they entered it a couple or so weeks earlier. So now the Russians are not only in the center, but there's also reports that the Russians are also attempting to also take control over the western part of KOZACHA LOPAN. So if KOZACHA LOPAN were to fall to Russia, then basically I think what will happen is everything here on this part of the border with Ukraine will probably fall to the Russians within a couple or so months, if not sooner, because KOZACHA LOPAN is probably like their best stronghold when it comes to holding these areas, either that or Zolochiv. And also, yeah, KOZACHA LOPAN opens the door to Zolochiv. But yeah, I'm expecting all of this and maybe Udi to come under Russian control probably by the end of summer or so. So yeah, then after that, the Russians may attempt to try an offensive further southward towards Berzuki, and then you're already at Derhachi, which is basically the suburbs of Kharkiv city itself. Now, getting out of Kharkov region, let's go into Sumy. Syriac now concurs that evil Zensky is under Russian control, and he has also declared the recapture of Kindratovka by the Russians too. So with Kindratovka recaptured, this basically opens the door to Khotan being taken too by the Russians. And if Khotan falls, well, the outskirts of Sumy city are going to be pretty much cooked. FPV drones, fiber optic drones, conventional weaponry like shells and mortar fire, they will all be wide open for the Russians. So Sumy city may have no choice but to start evacuating probably by August or September at the latest. So yeah, it's not looking good for them here. And then finally, in the Glukov direction, or Khlukiv, the Russians have claimed full control over the village of Bachivesk. And there's reports that they have also started clashes too for the village of Mala Sobika. And there's also some reports of the Russians advancing north towards the village of Ulaynovo. And if they're to take that, then they would have essentially all these empty fields basically here, along with a few villages in a cauldron. So I guess the Russian objective here is to, I guess, take all these lands, so then they would be able to push on Glukov or Glukov right here. It's a pretty big city for Ukraine standards. And if they're able to do that, I guess they can then safely establish a Sumy military civilian administration, a junta, to administer and govern the territories of Sumy Oblast that would be under their control. Now, I'm also expecting in the next couple of months or so from now, I think the Russian control over Sumy region is probably going to, I think, be bigger than what the Ukrainians had at their peak in the Kursk region a couple or so years ago now. Can't believe it's been that long, but here we are. And what I expect will happen is, I guess maybe they might even claim Sumy as part of Russia, for all I know. Anything could happen at this point. People are talking, of course, about the Russian tankers getting struck in the Azov Sea, and also their oil refineries too being struck. But to be honest, I don't really care that much, because I think it means little in the grand scheme of things. And that is, of course, the actual war in Ukraine itself. Until the Ukrainians start really pushing the Russians out of Ukraine, I don't think people should care about those little things. They're just a bunch of PR stunts for Zelensky to prove to the West and his backers, investors, so on and so forth, to prove that Ukraine is still worth supporting. But let's be honest, I think everyone is tired of this war, and they just want to see it end by any means necessary, even if it were, of course, to mean that Russia would take over Ukraine. Well, at least half of it at this point, because I don't think they're going to take over the whole country. And when I mean people are getting tired, I'm referring to, of course, the general population and not really the politicians, because they're very much invested in this war. So anyway, that's going to do it for today's video, everybody. I hope you all found it informative, if not entertaining, and I'll see you all next time. So take good care of yourselves, and bye-bye. Peace out.